Get those geese out of your flax. Cyrus Ransom said it loud, loud enough to carry the length of the scale platform at the Loop Bend Mercantile and out to the loafer's bench under the porch awning, and he said it laughing, holding up her first simple sheaf of blue-stemmed flax and turning it in the hot light like a thing he'd found broken in the road. The widow set her sample on the platform and did not flinch. She was young, not yet 30, auburn-haired, the hair pinned up in a low, plain knot that had come loose at the temples over the long drive in from the tableland. She wore the one deep crimson work dress she kept whole, the red of it the brightest color on that gray plank platform of grain sacks and dust. And under her other arm she carried one large gray goose, calm against her hip, its long neck laid easy over her forearm, and a single wild blue flax stem tucked in her fingers. "It's good flax, Mr. Ransom," she said. "Weigh it. Good flax." He let the sheaf drop and wiped his palm slow so the men at the bench could watch him do it. A lone woman turning geese loose in a stand of grain instead of hoeing it clean like a Christian farmer. Get those birds off your ground before they trample what little you've grown, and maybe next year you'll bring me a crop worth the platform. The geese haven't trampled a stem. The Goose Woman. That's the name the county's put on you. You know that? I know the name. I know what August will make of it, too. She kept her voice level. Weigh the sample or don't, but weigh it fair. Fair. He laughed the short laugh again, for the bench. A widow's flax fetches a widow's price, same as any. It isn't the same as any. That's the part all of you are going to learn. He waited. He gave her the low figure he'd have given any lone woman, and she took it. Because there was no other buyer within 2 days' haul in that country, and a man on the bench laughed at something that might have been her, and the name rode out the prop door on the laugh. The Goose Woman. That widow who walked geese in her flax. Here is the shape of it in 2 sentences, before you settle in. Her husband had broken the sod on that tableland quarter with his own hands and died of a burst appendix his second spring. 3 days of fever in a country with no doctor nearer than the railhead, and he'd left her the claim half proved up. The flock of gray geese he'd bought as goslings for the table, and the shame in that hard county of a woman farming a man's ground alone. And the county, being what counties were on the high plains in a dry decade, had decided that a woman fool enough to lose her flock among the standing flax could not be sensible about anything. So they made her the joke of the loafer's bench, the Goose Woman, the widow who let her birds ruin her crop. Now stay with her. Because the men on that porch were about to be taught a thing not one of them would forget. And the lesson had been set down years before in a dead woman's pencil that no soul on that bench had ever thought to read. It was on the road home, where the trail crossed the dry wash below her quarter, that Asa Kell caught her up. He was a rancher off the big grass to the north, a lean man, earnest and a little weathered, in a dark hat gone pale at the crease and a plain vest and suspenders worn soft, and he sat his horse easy, not thinking about it. He was not a talker. She knew him as you know anyone in a thin country, by sight and by what was said. And what was said of Asa Kell was that he was fair and quiet, and ran a clean outfit up on the north grass. Mrs. Wren, he touched the hat. I'll come straight to it. I watched your flock this spring from the section line. Your geese walk that flax and never break a stem. They don't touch the flax, she said. The stem's too bitter for them. They walk it for what's on the ground. For what's on the ground. He looked at the horizon, giving her room, not pushing. I've a proposition, whole and plain. Come fall, you'll want winter graze for that flock, and I've stubble standing idle after the works. I've a stone-floored granary on the home place, dry, that'll keep your flax sound through any weather. Winter graze for the birds, the use of the granary for your crop, and board for you through the cold if you want it. Nothing more said, no strings on it. She looked at him a moment. It was the first thing anyone in that country had said to her since the burying that treated her like a woman with a crop worth housing and not a woman to be pitied or run off her ground. "Why me?" she said. "You've heard what they call me at the platform. I've watched your field come on greener than any hoed quarter in the valley. I don't much care what Ransom's bench calls anybody." He said it without weight, a plain fact. "Will you take the graze?" "I'll think on it. That's all I'd ask." He touched the hat again and turned the horse up the north trail, and he had not once said the word husband or widow or the name the town used, and she marked that. She marked it the whole drive home. The geese were not foolishness, and they were not luck. They came out of a book. Her mother had kept it, a farm memorandum book bound in oilcloth, gone the color of weak tea, the pages inside close written in pencil and stained with grease and the brown ghost of spilled things, and it had been carried out of the old country's own locust years, when the hoppers had come 3 summers running, and the flax was all that stood between the family and hunger. There was a rule near the front, underscored twice. A flock walked over young grain, at dawn eats the worm, and the young hopper off the ground before it can climb, and weeds and dungs the row in the one pass, and geese will not touch flax, for the stem is bitter to them. Her mother had learned it one ruined summer at a time in a country a whole ocean away, and she had set it down in pencil so that no daughter would have to learn it twice. So the goose woman did not farm her flax as the tableland farmed. She did not hoe it clean and dust it and pray. She turned her flock into the young flax at first light. 40 gray geese moving down the rows in the cool while the dew was still on the ground, and they ate. They ate the cutworm curled at the root and the pale, hatching grasshopper the instant it came up out of the warm soil, before it could climb a stem or grow a wing. And they took the young weed with it and left their droppings down the row, and the flax bitter to a goose's mouth. They never touched, weeding and manuring and pest clearing, all of it in one dawn pass, just as the pencil said. It was not a thing the men on the bench could see from the platform. All they could see was fowl loose in the standing crop, and a flock let into the grain was a joke as old as grain. She took Asa's offer. She rode up to the home place 2 days later and told him so at the granary rail. "I'll take the winter graze," she said, "and the granary for the flax, if the price of it is fair and named now, not later. I don't take what I can't pay back. There's no price on it," he said. "The stubble's eaten by weather if the birds don't eat it. The granary sits empty. Then I'll pay it in flax straw for your bedding and goose eggs through the spring, and we'll call it even. And I'll hear no argument. No argument." A small thing crossed his face, almost a smile, gone before it settled. "You drive a hard trade for a woman folks say has no sense. Folks say a deal of things. Bring your wagon when the flax is cut, and you'll see whether I've sense." The summer settled into work. She was up before the light, out in the gray cool with the flock, walking the rows with a willow switch, moving the geese down one land and back up the next, counting acres and counting birds, and the flax came on behind them blue and clean and heavy-heading, while the hoed quarters up and down the valley stood dusty and worm-bit and thin. It was not pretty work, and there's no pretending it was. Wet skirts to the knee at dawn, and a switch arm gone dead by noon, and the same rose 100 times over, and she did it, and the flax kept coming on blue. Asa rode down himself the third week, which was a thing his man could have done, and stood at the edge of the field while she worked the flock, filling the fence corner with his shadow, not offering to help because he could see she didn't need it. They stay off the flax, he said. Every stem. I watched a full pass. The stem's bitter. It's the whole reason the thing works. Put a flock in wheat or corn, and they'd strip it, but flax they won't touch, so they clean the ground under it and leave the crop standing. She did not look up from the flock. My mother worked that out in a country where the hoppers came every third year, and she wrote down why, and I only read it. My father hoed his ground clean his whole life and dusted it besides. So did every man in this valley, till a bad year teaches them there's another way, or they go under teaching themselves. She turned a straggling goose back into the land with the switch. My mother went under first and learned after. I got the learning without the going under. That's the only difference between her and me, and it's the only difference between me and Ransom's bench. He was quiet a while, watching the flock move blue-shadowed along the flax in the low sun. "Your granary door hangs crooked," he said finally, "the one you'll haul the flax to. It's dropped on its top hinge, and it won't swing true. Damp will get to your crop through a door that won't seat. I know it. It's on my list past the cutting. It's on my list before I ride out." And he said no more about it. Here is where the thing between them grew, and it grew slow, without a word said about it, because they had both been left hard by life, and both had quit expecting anything. The next morning she hauled a sample load up to the home place and found the sagging granary door taken down and rehung true on a mended hinge, swinging quiet and seating tight against the jamb, and Asa nowhere about to be thanked for it. He never was. He never said. The week after, when his man came by the quarter, she walked out and laid the first eggs of the season, 6 of them, warm in a nest of flax straw, up on the horn of Asa's saddle where it hung on the rail, and did not say why, and the man did not ask. That was the whole of their courting for the better part of a season. A crooked door hung true, 6 eggs on a saddle horn. But a hard country does not leave a woman bee for long, and the trouble, when it came from more than one quarter at once. There was a county agent that summer, an extension man out from the land-grant college with a badge of learning and a pad of forms, and he rode the valley writing down what he saw. When he came to a quarter and saw 40 geese loose among the standing flax, he wrote it up as the book of the day told him to. That loose fowl set into a grain crop fouled it and spread the worm rather than checking it, and he filed the paper with the county and posted a copy at the Mercantile where every soul could read it. And Cyrus Ransom, who had a college man's paper to hide behind now, cut her scale credit to nothing and let it be known he'd take no more of the goose woman's flax at any price, paper or cash. "You've a college man's word against you now," he told her across the platform, and there were men enough at the bench to hear it, not just my say. "Lose foul a grain field. It's written and filed. I'll not stake this house's credit on flax the state itself calls fouled. The statesman watched my field for the time it takes to write a form," she said. "He never watched it at dawn. He counted my geese and not what my geese were eating. That is the sum of his learning. It's more learning than you've got. We'll see whose learning stands come August." She took up her reins. "It's all any of us are waiting on now, and you know it." Then, that same week, the dog came. It was a stray drover's dog gone wild off the trail, and it got into her flock in the black of a moonless night, and by the time she was out of the soddy with the lantern, it had run the geese into the wire and killed a dozen and scattered the rest across the tableland in the dark. She spent the night and half the next day gathering the living birds back off the grass, and she buried the dead ones, and she stood in the trampled corner of her flax with the count run short and the college man's paper posted in town and her credit cut to nothing, and she came the closest she ever came to quitting. There was a stock drover passing through who'd offered cash for the whole flock, birds and all, no questions, enough to pay the road east to her sisters in Grand Island and start where no soul had ever spoken the words Goose Woman. She sat a long time at her mother's table with a pencil in her hand to write the sister that she was coming. She did not write it. She opened the oilcloth book instead, and on the next clean line under her mother's hand, she wrote down the loss in her own. 12 birds, night dog, flock run and scattered, wired down in the east corner. She wrote what had happened and what it cost, because her mother had taught her to set the failures down so they would only cost you the once. Then she went to bed, and she was up before the light, and she went out to the flock that was left and walked them through the flax in the cool. What the men on that porch were about to learn, what the college man had filed and Ransay had posted and not one of them had the patience to read, was written in a dead woman's pencil on a table out on the tableland. And the summer was about to ask the question out loud. It came at the end of the first week of August, and it came as judgment comes in that country, out of a hot white sky with no warning and no mercy in it. There had been a smell on the wind for a day and a haze low on the western horizon that the old men said was smoke and the older men said was not. Then, in the middle of a still hot morning, the sun dimmed as though a cloud had crossed it, and there was no cloud. The light went brown, and the whole valley heard it before they rightly saw it, a dry, rushing rattle high in the air, a sound like a hard rain coming that was not rain, the sound of a million dry wings and a million small jaws. The Rocky Mountain locust had come down on the Loup Valley. They came out of the west in a glittering, churning cloud that dimmed the August sun to a copper coin, and they came down. They fell on the valley in a rattling gray rain, so thick a man could not see the far fence, so thick they broke the tender branches under their own weight, so thick the ground moved. And they ate. They ate the wheat to the crown, and the corn to the stalk, and the garden to the dirt. They ate the clean-hoed, dusted, prayed-over fields of every proper farmer in the valley, the fields the county agent had passed and approved, and they did it in 3 days, and when the cloud lifted and went east, the whole valley from the breaks to the tableland was gray stubble and bare dirt and the smell of it, every field stripped to the ground. Every field but hers. Understand what the valley woke to when the cloud lifted. From the mercantile porch to the far breaks there was not a green thing standing. The proper farmers walked out into their own fields and stood in dirt to the ankle where a crop had been at breakfast 3 days before. Ransom's own kitchen garden was stalks. The college man's approved and dusted quarters were bare ground. And out on the tableland, on the Goose Woman's quarter, standing blue and heavy-headed in the brown light, untouched, unbroken, whole, was flax. Standing flax. The only standing crop for as far as a man could ride. Because here is the thing, the pencil knew and the porch did not. Her geese had walked that ground all summer long, every dawn. taking the cutworm and the newly hatched hopper off the soil as fast as the warm earth gave them up, so that when the swarm came down out of the sky, it came down on a field already thinned, a field where the ground had been cleared of its own hatch bird by bird all season, and her living flock met the descending edge of the swarm the same as they'd met the hatchlings, working the margins, eating at the fringe where the cloud settled, and the flax itself, bitter-stemmed, the swarm passed over it as the geese had always passed over it, for a hopper starving on bare dirt will not eat what a goose won't touch. The very flock the county had called ruinous was the only defense standing in the whole valley, and the very crop they'd called doomed was the only crop left alive. She walked her field on the fourth morning and counted what stood. She had put in 40 acres of flax that spring. She walked it row by row and counted the acres come through whole, and the count did not fall as a ruined field's count falls. 40 acres she had sown. 40 acres standing near enough, the swarm having taken only the thin outer margin where it first came down before the flock beat it back. 38 acres whole, and then, as the word spread and the valley began to ride out to see the thing for themselves, they did not count what was ruined. They counted what was saved. 38 acres. Then, as buyers and neighbors and the railhead man himself came out and she began to promise it away, 30 acres left to sell, then 18, then the last blue 9 acres that the whole cut-off valley rode out on a Sunday to stand at the fence and look at, the only standing crop for miles, blue-flowered and heavy-headed under a sky the hoppers had left empty. She did not gloat. There is no scene in this story where the goose woman stands up on Ransom's platform and tells the bench what they can do with their college man's paper, and if you are waiting for it, it does not come, because that is not the woman her mother raised through the hungry years across the water. She opened her granary, the one with the door Asa had hung true, and she sold her flax at a fair weight and a fair price, the same to every buyer alike, no widow's price and no gouging price either, though a gouging price is what a starving valley would have paid. And before the money, before the railhead's offer, and before the buyers from the east, she carried the first of it herself to the families the hoppers had ruined. She gave the first hatch of goslings that spring to the men who'd lost everything, breeding stock to build a flock of their own against the next locust year, and she gave the first setting of eggs to the wives whose gardens were dirt, and she took nothing for those, and said nothing about it, and that was answer enough. The reckoning came to her one family at a time in the order they found their courage. The first to cross was a boy, Ransom's own, standing at the granary door with his hat crushed to his chest. "My father didn't send me," he said. "He doesn't know I'm here." My mother did. "She wants to know, will you teach her the goose way so ours don't get ate down to the dirt next hopper year?" She looked at him a while. "Come Saturday," she said. "Tell your mother to bring a switch and a strong back and be here before the light, because all of it happens at dawn or it doesn't happen at all. I don't teach it standing at noon." "Yes, ma'am." He turned to go, then stopped and looked out at the blue field standing whole behind her against all that bare dirt. "Is it true you told my pa August would tell everyone?" "I told the county August would make of it what it would." He come home from the platform in June laughing. The boy's voice had gone careful. He ain't laughed since the swarm lifted. He walked our garden and there weren't a leaf on it, and then he rode up here and sat on his horse at your fence a long time looking at your flax. And he didn't say nothing, and he rode home. The boy looked at the standing field again, and there was something like awe in it. August told, "All right," he said, and he went back down the trail he'd come up. Ransom came himself 2 days after, on foot, no bench to play to, and no college man's paper in his hand. He stood at her granary door with his hat in both hands. "I was wrong about you," he said. "I was wrong all spring and all summer, and I said things in front of the whole county I've no right to unsay. And I'm sorry for the whole of it. Your flax is the only crop standing for 30 Mile, and every soul in this valley knows now it was them birds that did it." She let him say it. She did not make it easy, and she did not make it hard. "I'll sell through your house again," she said. "At a fair price, the store families and the ruined ones first. They didn't laugh loudest, and they've babies to feed, and I won't punish them for your mouth. That's more than I'd have done, was I you. I expect it is. That's the difference between us, Mr. Ransom, and it always was." Then the Grange sent for her, and asked would she stand up at the hall and teach the flock and flax method to the valley, the dawn walking and the bitter stem, and the one pass that weeds and dungs and clears the hopper all at once, so the country would not lose another summer to the swarm. She stood at the front of the hall before the people who had named her, and she taught it, reading in places from the oilcloth book. "There's no trick to it," she told the room, "which is the very reason not one of you looked for one. You walk a flock over young grain at first light, while the dew's still down and the hoppers just come up out of the warm ground and can't yet climb or fly. The birds eat the worm and the young hopper off the dirt before it's a swarm, and they weed the row and dung it in the one pass, and flax they will not eat, its stem being bitter to them. Clean farming leaves the ground bare for the hopper to hatch clean into. A flock keeps the ground eaten down all summer, and when the swarm comes down, it comes down on a field already thinned." A woman near the front raised her hand. "My father always said you keep fowl out of a grain field or they'll ruin the crop. They'll ruin wheat and they'll ruin corn, and your father was right about those. But flax they won't eat, and that's the whole of why it works, and it's why it must be flax and a flock together, not one without the other." She let that sit. "You all saw a field of geese in June and called it ruin. You saw it again the week the swarm passed, standing blue in the only grain for 30 Mile, and you called it the last crop in the valley. Same field, same birds. The only thing that changed was that the summer finally asked the question out loud, and my mother had wrote the answer down before I was born. That's a deal of bother, walking birds every dawn," a man called from the side. And a few laughed, but it was a different laugh than June's. "Careful now. It's a deal less bother than standing in dirt to your ankle on the 4th morning," she said, "and I noticed not one of you laughed on the ride out here. Nobody answered that. A flock at dawn, and flax for the crop, and the patience to do it every morning of the summer, whether the bench is laughing or not. That is the method entire, and it isn't mine." She held the book up. "This is my mother's hand, carried out of the old country's own hopper years, and I only kept it. If the paper prints anything of this, print her name on it, and not mine. The county paper sent a man who wrote it all down and printed it the next week, the whole of the flock and flax method. And he'd asked the college for the proper name of the thing, and printed that too, over the top of it, the scientific words for what a dead woman had known in pencil, that a flock of fowl walked through a standing crop is a living check on the hatching pest, and a weeding and a manuring in the single pass. And under the scientific words, because the goose woman would not let it stand as hers or the college's was her mother's name, so that a woman a dozen years dead and buried in ocean and a plain away was written at last into the county record in ink, which is a thing pencil only dreams of. Asa came at the end of the works, when the crew was paid off and the flax was in his dry granary and the first cool of the fall was in the mornings. He came to the granary door, where she stood with her sleeves pushed up and the crimson dress faded now from a summer of dawns, and he took off the dark hat and turned it in his hands the way his kind do when the words are hard. And he did not make a speech, because he was not a man who made them. "Stay through the winter," he said. 4 words. She understood the whole of what was under them, the granary and the grays and the board and the cold coming on, and the thing neither of them had said across a whole season of a door hung true and eggs left warm on a saddle horn, and she understood he was not asking to rescue her, because she had rescued herself, and the whole county knew it now. "You sure of that?" she said. "There's a bench in town that still has opinions about the Goose Woman." "The bench can keep its opinions. I've watched you since the section line in the spring, and I knew my own mind about the middle of June, and I've only been waiting on the nerve to say it." He looked at her plain. "I'm not asking you off your ground. Keep your quarter and your flock and your mother's book. I'm asking you to bring the whole of it up onto the north grass and stay. Stay through the winter, and we'll see about the spring." For the winter, she said, "and we'll see about the spring." It was as close to yes as either of them needed, and he heard it that way. And something eased in his shoulders that had been set there a long time. The oilcloth book is still kept. It sits in a kitchen on the good grass to the north now, the cover mended with a strip of new cloth, the pencil pages filling past where the mother stopped, and past where the Goose Woman took it up, written in now in a third hand, smaller and rounder, a daughter's hand. And out the kitchen window there is flax, blue-flowered flax on quarter after quarter along the loop, and gray geese walking the green of it at dawn the length of the valley, for the method spread, as a true thing spreads. Farm to farm, and there is not a hop a year now that strips the loop as it stripped it once. "Read me the first rule again, Mama," the girl says some mornings, tracing the line near the front that is underscored twice. "You know it," the Goose Woman tells her. "Say it back. A flock at dawn eats the hopper off the ground, and geese won't touch flax, for the stem is bitter." That's it, every word. Your grandmother wrote that down in a country where the hoppers came every 3rd year and near starved her family out, so that you would never have to learn it the hard way she did. It cost her whole summers before she understood it. Don't you lose it. I won't. And she won't. There is one of these books in some kitchen in every county in that country. A dead woman's patience kept alive against the swarm, and the men who laughed are mostly forgotten now, and the flax still stands blue along the loop, and the geese still walk it at first light. If you have ever kept up a thing your people handed down, a rule or a way of doing that the whole world told you to leave behind, and then stood and watched the world come around to it in the end, then you already know why the Goose Woman did not need to gloat, and you know why this channel tells these stories. Leave a word below and tell us the county you're listening from. And tell us this, since you've come the whole road with her, when the sky went brown and every clean hoed field for 30 mile went to bare dirt in 3 days, was it the gray geese that saved her flax? Or was it the woman a dozen years dead who thought to write the rule down where a daughter would one day read it?